Human entrails splattered across the smoldering crater as the gargantuan alien warbeast ripped Jordan Johnson's partner to shreds before his eyes. "They should have known better than unleashing those abominations on our world," Dr. Marcus Novak proclaimed to the cohort of stone-faced United Earth Defense Academy cadets. In 2257, the Suliban Empire discovered our planet. Emperor Zortak saw us as primitive slaves ripe for conquest, vastly underestimating humanity's tenacity. The lecture hall dimmed, holographic star maps casting an eerie red glow. Dr. Novak zoomed in on Earth. The Suliban invasion fleet was formidable, 500 warships, 100 transports, 10,000 warriors. But their most terrifying weapons were the 1,000 genetically engineered warbeasts. These monstrous killing machines, 4 meters tall with 4 muscular arms, 2 powerful legs, and steel-crushing mandibles, were bred for planetary subjugation. Blurry video footage played, showing drop pods raining down on cities, crashing into skyscrapers. Panicked screams filled the audio as the pods cracked open, revealing the nightmarish warbeasts. This was our darkest hour. The warbeasts slaughtered thousands, paving the way for Suliban warriors to crush our defenses. If brave men and women hadn't fought back, the human race would have been enslaved or exterminated. The projector zoomed in on a muscular man in a police uniform, staring down a hulking warbeast in the ruins of Times Square. "This is Officer Jordan Johnson, a former Marine," Novak said. "When the beasts hit New York, he charged headlong into the chaos. His courage would mark a crucial turning point, showing the Suliban that we wouldn't submit, that we'd fight these demons to our last breath." Dr. Novak turned back to the cadets. Jordan Johnson was caught completely by surprise, like the rest of the NYPD, when those Suliban drop pods started crashing down all over Manhattan. But once that hideous alien beast clawed its way out and started rampaging, Jordan didn't hesitate. The hologram shifted to bodycam footage from Johnson's uniform. He and his partner Mike Thompson raised their pistols and unloaded full mags into the charging creature's chest. The bullets ricocheted off, not even leaving a scratch. "Shit, it's not working!" Thompson yelled. He and Jordan dove behind the wreckage of a crushed yellow taxi as the monster barreled past, its footsteps shaking the pavement. Jordan peeked out from cover, watching the beast swat aside cars like toys, civilians running for their lives. His eyes darted around, searching for anything he could use. That's when he spotted it. A fuel tanker truck knocked on its side, leaking gasoline all over the street. "Mike, I've got a plan. Cover me!" Before Thompson could respond, Jordan sprinted from cover. He clambered up into the overturned tanker's cab and turned the key. Miraculously, the engine roared to life. Black diesel smoke belched from the exhaust pipes. Shifting into gear, Jordan floored the accelerator. The tanker lurched forward, its tires screeching against the asphalt. Jordan aimed the massive vehicle straight at the warbeast, currently occupied with smashing through a department store. At the last possible second, Jordan threw open the driver's side door and hurled himself out. His body hit the ground hard and rolled as the tanker slammed into the alien and exploded in a massive fireball. The warbeast's piercing screech cut through the blast. Jordan looked up to see the creature stagger out of the flames, its exoskeleton charred and smoking, but it wasn't dead. As the beast closed in on him, Jordan spotted a gaping wound at the base of its neck, where the armored plates had been blasted away, a soft, fleshy weak point. Jordan pushed himself to his feet and ran to a nearby construction site. He grabbed a long metal pole and started furiously filing down one end against a concrete barrier, crafting a crude but sharp tip. The beast was only a dozen meters away now, its mandibles clacking together in anticipation. Jordan hoisted up the improvised spear, pulled his arm back, and hurled it with all his strength. The makeshift harpoon found its mark, burying itself deep in the monster's neck. The creature screamed and thrashed, blue blood spraying from the wound, until finally it collapsed with an earth-shaking thud and moved no more. Dr. Novak paused the recording. What Jordan Johnson did that day was more than kill a monster. He showed the world that the Suliban's war beasts could be killed. that we could fight back. All over the globe, police, soldiers, and even civilians saw that a single cop brought one down and found the courage to do the same. Dr. Novak flipped to a new slide, showing a flurry of military activity around the globe. Tanks rolled through city streets, jets streaked across smoke-filled skies, and soldiers marched in formation, their faces grim with determination. As Jordan Johnson's story spread, militaries worldwide mobilized to combat the Suliban threat. But our leaders knew that divided we would fall. That's why, in an unprecedented act of global unity, the world's most powerful nations came together. The hologram shifted to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, where three figures strode purposefully into the Grand Assembly Hall: U.S. President Amanda Nichols, Chinese President Liu Wei, and Russian President Viktor Petrov. They took their seats at the center of the room, the eyes of every world leader upon them. President Nichols spoke first, her voice resolute. "We face an enemy that cares nothing for borders or nationalities, an enemy that will not stop until every last one of us is either dead or enslaved. We cannot afford to stand divided any longer." President Wei nodded in agreement. "Today we must put aside our differences and stand together as one Earth, one humanity against the Suliban Empire." President Petrov stood, his broad shoulders squared. "To that end, I propose the formation of the Earth Defense Coalition, a global alliance to coordinate our efforts and pool our resources against the invaders." The assembly erupted into applause, a palpable sense of hope and determination filling the room. Within hours, the EDC was established, and the full might of Earth's militaries was brought to bear against the Suliban. Dr. Novak turned back to the cadets. The EDC wasted no time. Our brightest minds came together, sharing technology and intelligence to devise new weapons and strategies against the war beasts and the Suliban warriors beginning to land. The screen lit up with schematics for advanced energy weapons, exoskeleton armor suits, and electromagnetic pulse devices designed to disable Suliban technology. Footage played of EDC forces deploying these new tools in battle, turning the tide against the once unstoppable alien monsters. And leading the charge was none other than Jordan Johnson himself. Novak smiled. Recruited by the EDC, he put together a hand-picked team of the best beast slayers from around the world, civilians and soldiers alike. The hologram showed Johnson and his team, armed to the teeth, dropping into war zones from New York to Tokyo to Nairobi. They moved with practiced precision, coordinating with local forces to bring down war beasts and push back the Suliban warriors, city by bloody city. Johnson's beast slayers became the tip of the spear, the EDC's most elite and effective fighting force, against the Suliban's biological weapons. All over the world, they trained militaries and civilian resistances, imparting the hard-won knowledge of how to kill these monsters. The cadets watched in rapt attention as the tide of the war began to turn, but Dr. Novak's expression remained somber. Yet even as we managed to contain the war beasts, a new and perhaps even deadlier threat was emerging: the main Suliban invasion force. As their troop transports began to land, disgorging tens of thousands of Suliban warriors, it became clear that the true battle for Earth was only just beginning. The Suliban warriors emerged from their landing craft, plasma rifles raised, as terrified civilians fled in all directions. Sydney's once peaceful streets erupted into chaos. Amid the panic, a Suliban strike team stormed a crowded shopping mall, rounding up hundreds of shoppers as hostages. They forced the captives into a tightly packed throng, using them as human shields while pushing deeper into the city. "This is General Mira," a cold, authoritative female voice crackled over the Suliban comm channels. "All units advance on the government district. Crush any resistance." Just then, the crump of an explosion echoed from the mall's parking garage. Suliban soldiers whirled to see Jordan Johnson and Alex Nakamura burst from a service tunnel, pulse rifles blazing. Johnson put a tight cluster of blue plasma bolts through the nearest Suliban's chest, burning through the alien's ceramic armor like paper. Nakamura dropped two more with precise headshots. The hostages screamed and dropped to the floor as Johnson's beast slayers poured out of the tunnel behind them, laying down covering fire. EDC regular forces emerged from the mall's side entrances, catching the Suliban in a brutal crossfire. In minutes, the strike team lay dead, the hostages quickly evacuated by EDC medics. Johnson keyed his comm. "This is Beast Slayer Actual. Hostages at grid reference Alpha 7 secured. Moving to next objective, over." Similar scenes played out across Sydney as the Beast Slayers and EDC forces clashed with Suliban shock troops in a brutal urban battle. Gunfire and explosions rocked the city, Suliban and human soldiers fighting room to room, building by building. At Sydney University, a Suliban platoon found themselves facing a lone human in battered EDC armor, his face concealed by a full helmet. They leveled their weapons, plasma charges whining. Suddenly, the floor beneath the alien's feet exploded, a pre-placed demolition charge, reducing the building's load-bearing walls to rubble. The Suliban screamed as they plummeted into the basement. Lieutenant Nakamura emerged from behind a nearby column, his rifle picking off the survivors before they could recover. "Targets neutralized," he reported, proceeding to the next ambush point. Across the city, the Beast Slayers used every dirty trick they'd learned fighting the war beasts. Improvised explosives, battlefield deception, close-quarters ambushes, to keep the Suliban warriors off balance and disoriented. But the linchpin of Johnson's plan was the strike on General Mira's command post, hidden in a fortified bunker beneath Sydney's central station. As EDC troops kept the Suliban forces occupied, Johnson and a hand-picked team slipped into the city's storm drain tunnels. They navigated the dank, twisting passages, guided by intel from resistance scouts, until they reached a concealed access point just below the Suliban bunker. Johnson signaled his team to stack up at the door. On his mark, they breached, flashbang grenades and stun batons taking down Mira's unsuspecting guards in a lightning-fast assault. They found Mira in the command center, a plasma pistol in her hand. She snarled at Johnson, her finger tightening on the trigger, only for Nakamura's rifle butt to slam into the back of her head, knocking her unconscious. "Package secured," Johnson reported over the comm. "All units, the command is a go for Phase 2. With Mira's capture, the Suliban chain of command fell apart. EDC forces surged forward, overrunning the alien positions, taking hundreds of warriors prisoner. The images of a bound and restrained General Mira, being paraded through Sydney's war-torn streets by triumphant EDC troops, became a defining moment of the war, a signal to the world that the Suliban could be beaten. Emboldened by the victory, EDC forces around the globe went on the offensive from Berlin to Beijing, driving the invaders back. For the first time since the war began, it seemed humanity might have a fighting chance. But as the cadets watched the holographic displays in rapt attention, Dr. Novak's expression remained grim. "The celebrations were premature," he said. "Even as we savored our victory in Sydney, the Suliban were preparing to unleash a new horror upon the earth." The cadets sat stunned as Dr. Novak recounted the darkest chapter of the Suliban War. "Emperor Zortak was desperate," Novak said, his voice low and grave. "His ground forces were in tatters, his war beasts slaughtered, but he had one last card to play." The holographic display shifted, revealing a massive Suliban warship in low Earth orbit. Its hull bristled with enormous plasma cannons, each one capable of leveling a city with a single shot. "Zortak ordered a full-scale orbital bombardment of our major population centers," Novak continued. "He hoped to force our surrender through sheer terror and destruction." The cadets watched in horror as the cannons began to glow, charging up for a devastating salvo. But before they could fire, a series of explosions ripped across the ship's hull. "The EDC had anticipated this move," Novak explained, a hint of pride in his voice. "Our scientists had been working around the clock, reverse engineering captured Suliban technology. We managed to develop our own cloaked insertion pods, capable of attaching to a ship's hull undetected." The display zoomed in on a dozen small, sleek pods latching onto the Suliban flagship, like metallic ticks. Their hatches hissed open, disgorging heavily armed EDC commandos led by none other than Jordan Johnson and Alex Nakamura. Johnson's team had one objective, Novak said: disable the bombardment cannons no matter the cost. The cadets watched transfixed as Johnson and his soldiers fought their way through the ship's cramped corridors. The Suliban defenders were relentless, each one fighting to the last. But the EDC commandos were equally determined, pushing forward inch by bloody inch. Finally, they reached the ship's main reactor chamber. Johnson placed a series of demolition charges on the pulsing power cores, preparing to detonate them and cripple the vessel. But as he turned to make his escape, a massive figure stepped from the shadows. It was Emperor Zortak himself, clad in an ornate battlesuit, bristling with advanced weaponry. "You think you've won, human?" the Emperor snarled. "You think you can defeat me?" Johnson raised his rifle, but Zortak was too fast. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon from Johnson's hands and slamming him into the chamber wall with bone-crushing force. The two warriors grappled in a desperate hand-to-hand struggle, trading blows that would have killed an ordinary human. Johnson fought with the strength of desperation, landing a series of punishing strikes to Zortak's head and body. But the Emperor was relentless. His genetically enhanced physiology allowed him to shrug off blows that would have felled a lesser being. With a roar of fury, he seized Johnson by the throat and lifted him off his feet. "Now you die," Zortak growled, his fingers tightening around Johnson's neck. But with a final burst of strength, Johnson managed to wrap his legs around Zortak's arm. With a savage twist, he snapped the limb like a twig. The Emperor howled in agony, dropping Johnson to the floor. The EDC commando wasted no time. He scooped up a fallen plasma rifle and unleashed a barrage of shots directly into Zortak's face. The Emperor's head exploded in a shower of gore. His lifeless body toppled backwards, smoke rising from his charred stump of a neck. But Johnson had no time to savor his victory. He looked down to see a jagged piece of shrapnel protruding from his abdomen, his blood pooling on the deck beneath him. With trembling fingers, he keyed his comm unit. "Nakamura, set the charges and get our people out," he gasped. "I'm not leaving you, sir." Nakamura's voice crackled over the link. "That's an order, Lieutenant," Johnson managed. "Go!" With a final effort, he dragged himself to the reactor core and input the detonation code. The display began to flash red, warning of the imminent overload. As Nakamura and the other survivors raced to the escape pods, Johnson let out a final breath. "For Earth," he whispered, and then the world went white. The flagship vanished in a blinding flash of light, the explosion tearing it apart from the inside. The shockwave caught the nearby Suliban vessels, sending them careening out of control. Within moments, the mighty Suliban warfleet was reduced to a field of burning wreckage, drifting lifelessly in the void. Dr. Novak paused the display, turning back to the stunned cadets. "Jordan Johnson's sacrifice broke the back of the Suliban Empire," he said solemnly. "With their emperor dead and their fleet in ruins, the remaining warriors quickly surrendered." The display shifted one final time, showing EDC soldiers marching through the streets of a war-torn city, crowds of cheering civilians thronging around them. In the center of the formation, a group of soldiers carried a flag-draped casket, the name Jordan Johnson emblazoned on its side. "In the end, it was not our technology or our tactics that won the day," Novak said. "It was the courage and selflessness of heroes like Jordan Johnson, men and women who were willing to give their lives so that others might live free." The cadets sat in reverent silence as the last images faded away. Dr. Novak stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Never forget their sacrifice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Never forget what they fought for, because one day it may be your turn to stand in the breach, to face the darkness no matter the cost." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into each cadet in turn. "When that day comes, will you be ready? Will you have the strength to do what must be done, even if it means laying down your life for your species?" The cadets looked at each other, a new determination burning in their eyes. They knew the answer even if they hoped they would never have to prove it. Dr. Novak nodded, seeing the resolve on their faces. He knew that the future of humanity was in good hands. But even as the lecture ended and the cadets filed out of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Suliban were only the beginning, that there were far greater threats lurking in the darkness of space, waiting for their chance to strike. And he knew that when that day came, humanity would need every ounce of courage and sacrifice it could muster. For in the end, the universe was a cold and merciless place, and only the strong would survive. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.